Have you learning as like once I have food, I want to learn. I don't even care if I have shelter. I just want to learn things and like experiments, try stuff, like understand how the world works.
Was that something your parents encouraged?
Yeah, I think it's like I was saying earlier, like the kind of like encouraging the critical mindset,
Right.
and it's kind of like there's this anecdote of my parents, like well, I don't remember, but they told me that like when we were babies, like in the shopping cart in the mall, like my parents were explaining like, oh, so we're gonna use this chip that accesses our bank information, and in there is the information about the money they store there, but it's all virtual, it doesn't exist. And we work to get that information in there, that there is a certain amount, and then that allows us to get the food there. Because otherwise it's very confusing to a baby. Like,
Right.
what the hell is going on? Like, we go there, we pass through a gate, and then we have to scan the things. Why? It doesn't make sense.
Yeah. Still doesn't make sense to me.
No, it does. It really doesn't make sense. And actually, from an environmental standpoint, it doesn't make any sense. But kind of like explaining the things that were confusing.
Yeah.
And I just remember asking my dad like, "Dad, why is the sky blue?" And he's like, "Because it's reflecting off the water." I'm like, "Nah, that's not right." I remember that like I remember my parents told me that like they were like sometimes they would give me an explanation and it would be like, "No." Like the very old kid be like, "No."
Are you the youngest or eldest? Okay, younger. How many?
I just have one older brother.
Okay, right.
He's an engineer.
Yeah. Huh. And you were at such a young age able to reject information.
I was like,
You're like a stubborn child.
and now finally I know that it's like the Rayleigh scattering of the sun on the atmosphere, and like and the absorption of like nitrogen and stuff like this.
How do you know this?
Well, it's like I can actually recommend the course Sam Nielsen, Fundamentals of Lighting on Schoolism. Yeah.
That's for artists?
For artists, yeah.
Okay.
But that guy goes way into science, yeah. Yeah. But I loved it, and that kind of like scientific approach to art, I try to apply to everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It seems like...
I don't know if I learned it directly from him, but he definitely influenced me a lot.
Yeah, so science is something you're interested in?
Yeah, very interested in.
Right.
Which is like if you can, how to say, if you can use science to understand the world to make your art more accurate and better, then like what else can you do with science? I want to know, like, can you make like the life better for other people? Can you help other people? You know what I mean? Because art is kind of like or like entertainment. You know what I mean? But what else can you do? And it's the same for science. You know what I mean? Right now I'm using science for art, but what if I use art for science? So what if I use science for science? You know what I mean? Like, what kind of combination can be done? And like, to me, it's really interesting. Yeah. So I've been trying to pick up a lot of other things like learning data analysis, statistics, a little bit about at least the theory of machine learning, artificial intelligence, a lot of those things, and a lot of physics as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I want to see where can very much like the same way where like I learned 3D and I learned 2D and I want to combine the two. Now I'm learning a lot of science and still practicing art and seeing like, well, is there a way I can combine the two? You know what I mean?
Right, yeah.
Like making scientific visualization, I don't know, maybe or just simply using like the artistic approach to solve science problems. Would that help? I don't know.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I want to find out. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
That's so fascinating. And now that you say it, there was the most torturous tutorial I ever made was on PBR materials.
Mm-hmm.
Because I had to understand
Oh yeah.
what happens to light when it hits an object.
Yeah.
And it very quickly got scientific, and I was not ready for
Yeah,
it.
yeah. I remember having like sometime there is the case, and it's like more and more, and actually it's very exciting. Where like there is a problem that it's like I won't gain anything from solving it except knowledge, right? And that excites me because then it's like it's purely a quest for knowledge, and there is no biological response or it's not for my job, it's not for anything except my pure enjoyment of knowing. And for example, there was one which is like, why is there, when there's a canyon, right, and there's light hitting the top of the canyon and light is bouncing back down multiple times, why does it get redder and redder every single time? Right? Why does the bounce get warmer? You know what I mean? What is the actual physics of why the bounce get warmer? And then I was looking into like spectral, spectral response of the material, and like that makes sense because if you have a spectrum of light and red is here and violet is here, and your material, which is like the rock, is a little bit warmer, which is like it has like it has a distribution like this. Every time it's gonna bounce that warmer light on that warmer surface, it's gonna spike up. It's gonna compress all the other colors and absorb out all the other colors and leave only the red, right? Which is why you get very saturated red in the bottom of a canyon.
Right.
And I was like, and I'm not sure that's the perfect explanation. There might be like a better explanation. But
I think that's right.
But I think that was satisfying for the time being, and it was like, finally,
Yeah, right. Yeah. I know the feeling like
kind
this.
of that Pavlovian response from like the enjoyment of like finally cracking like how does science translate into visual type of problem.
Right. Yeah.
So that's why like when people say like, oh, like shadows are cooler, I'm like, what do you mean? It's way too simplistic. You know what I mean? It doesn't mean anything.
And sometimes a lot of it's recycled.
Yeah, it's recycled because people hear about it and then they're like, oh yeah, like the sky is blue. Well, the sky is blue. It depends. If like with the polarization angle of the Rayleigh scattering at sunset, it's very orange one side and very blue the other side. It's the bluest it can ever be because of polarization.
Yeah.
And or like stuff like this. Or sometimes it happens where like recently there was a lot of fire in California, and I saw a cloud and the sky and the sun was red, right? The sun was red, and I'm like, oh, that's my scattering. There has to be fire. And people were like, what do you mean? It's sunset. It's red. And I was like, no, it's like it's like 1 hour early to be that red. Like right now, like there is some medium that intercepting between us and the sun that is modifying the spectrum of that thing, which is actually the molecules of that dark like smoke. Right. We're absorbing the blue and reflecting. You know what I mean? Right. They were transmitting.
Okay.
They were transmitting much more red than they were transmitting blue, which was making the sun like very intense red, even though it was not quite sunset.
Right.
And I looked it up. I just came home and I looked it up and I was like, yeah, there's a fire.
So you obviously work now with a lot of really established artists. Is there anything different that you've noticed in the mindset between a working professional artist and people that can't find work?
I think like there's very various types of people like in the office in general, in the studio in general. There is like you have all kinds of different profile. Like there's like the artist that never shows his work to anyone, but he's amazing. You know what I mean? And you can't find him online, but he's actually better than a lot of other people that are very well known.
Yeah.
And yet he's still found work. You know what I mean? Just because he's that good.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because there are other people who are like very much like perfectionist. You know what I mean? Who would be like, I want to spend month and month and month on like that painting, and I want to release it only when it's perfect. You know what I mean? And and there are other people who are like more like very proactive to the community, and then drawing all the time, posting every single day. And there are some people who just never post anything. So it's hard to find like a very clear difference. You know what I mean, between the two, but I think it's just that like the kind of like work ethic, I think, is probably one, which is like the professional artist kind of like knows what the bar is, and like kind of the amateur artist maybe knows where the bar is, but like is still has a way to go to hit that bar, or just doesn't know at all about the bar, right? About what is the quality bar of a professional artist nowadays. And there's a lot of misconception as well, and it's like, and it's actually very difficult nowadays, as I think as an up and coming artist, to understand what is concept art, for example, because and I'm the main offender. My portfolio is kind of like half concept art, half illustration, and but yet I'm a concept artist, right? So it's kind of like confusing for people, you know what I mean? And sometimes I tag it concept art, you know what I mean? because you have to put it in a category, and maybe like
What's the difference? Illustration or concept?
It's hard to say. It's hard to say, and it's very confusing for people. Which is like the basic idea is that concept art is kind of like you have something that doesn't exist, and you come up with the design of what that thing looks like.
Okay.
Right? If that's a flying car, you kind of want to know like what character is going to fly that flying car, what is the purpose of the flying car in the story that needs to be this or that shape or evoke this or that, or have kind of like shape language that remind you of a bowl, you know what I mean? So it looks more aggressive, doesn't need to go fast, etc. There's all those sets of technical constraints on what this vehicle needs to do for the story, and it could be a vehicle, a prop, a character, anything, an environment.
Yeah.
And this is a very specific job,
Yeah.
and this is concept art. But where the line really blurs is that there is something called keyframe concept art, right? And those are actually concept art trying to put all the things that have been designed by concept artists beforehand, putting all those things together in one scene, and painting it really beautifully as an illustration to show it to producers.
Oh.
To
I guess
get the movie greenlit, or
Yeah.
get the game greenlit, or give the entire team like, hey, this is what we're making. This is the target goal. The game needs to look like this. You know what I mean? The very confusing thing comes when these pieces can be used as promotional pieces, right? Then they're not really in a production thing.
Yeah.
They're not really part of the production.
Yeah.
They're like a promotional piece, and they called it, and they released that, and they call it concept art. And it becomes very confusing because it's like
right.
some other people, there's a great artist called Jamie Jones, and for example, he's very primarily like more an illustrator than a concept artist. He's an amazing illustrator, and so for example, like he was I think doing something for Bungie, so he made an illustration for Bungie. But they might have called it concept art, even though it was clearly an illustration, an amazing illustration. But they might have called it concept art. It's totally not, you know. And so I think for beginners, it's getting really. It must be really frustrating and very confusing to find the line of like what is concept art and what is illustration. For me, I think about it simplifying it. Concept art is not a product. The product is the final movie or game that is going to be made. And illustration is a product in and of itself.
Oh yeah, that's a good way to define it.
You know what I mean?
That makes sense to me.
Like you're selling an illustration, and that's why actually illustration you can put a price on it. Concept art you have to go over their rate, right? Because it doesn't make sense that the client asks you like design me a vehicle. It's like if it's the DeLorean or if it's something else, it can be
As
6
long as it
months
needs to,
or
yeah.
1 day
Yeah.
or 10 years. You don't know. You know what I mean?
Yeah, right.
Like yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So
Okay.
I think like that's like the how I would explain it. But of course, like other people would explain it in different ways, which makes it very confusing. And I'm probably confusing other people, but I try to help.
Yeah. Do you think is the concept art industry very competitive? Is it harder to be a concept artist than say a 3D artist?
It's actually very counterintuitive in the way I would think, and I might be wrong, but I would think that there is actually a ceiling that like no matter how many people work in the industry or not, if you're not that good, you're not gonna get their job because you're just gonna waste people's time. You know what I mean? And reversely, if you're above that a certain ceiling, no matter how many jobs there are or people there are already in the industry, you will get jobs no matter what, because you're so useful that you save so much money to the production, right?
Yeah.
So there's kind of like there's the first threshold, and then there's the second threshold, and there's the gap where like people find jobs and stuff, and there is this other gap where like people never have to look for a job, and I think that like it's competitive in that middle zone, but it's not competitive in those other zones, right? And when I'm thinking about threshold, I'm thinking about just pure skill, right? Like how many problems can you solve through your thinking and your visuals, right? Just not the quality of just your illustration, but just like how many problems can you solve, and how good are you at solving those problems?
Yeah.
And so, yeah, like I was saying, very competitive within that middle zone. Like also very competitive within that like bottom zone because there's no jobs, right? So it's gonna be like very low wage. But like as soon as you hit a certain skill ceiling, all those things go away. The problem is, and what I think he's giving that impression of competitiveness is that the ceiling is increasing. The ceiling is increasing every single year to a crazy amount.
Like the standard of work?
Yeah, the standard of work is increasing dramatically. Because, like, every time we start hearing about a new artist who we never heard about before, and he's amazing, and just, like, blows everyone, and everyone is like, oh, now it's, like, one more guy on the list of, like, the 1,000 amazing artists that I heard about, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like, one more guy that makes me feel bad about my own work.
Right, yeah.
But, like, and every time one of those guys show up, every time one of those persons show up, like, it just shows everyone, like, how it's done. Like, the other day I found, like, one artist, and, like, her work was amazing, and, like, before, I thought, like, well, you know, like, for example, there's Ian McKegg, he's a artist, like, drawing, he does a lot of drawing, and, he's really good, so I thought, like, oh, he's, like, my top guy for drawing, you know, when I think about drawing, like, he's the bar, you know what I mean? But no, there's this other person I had never heard about, you know what I mean? And it's like, wow. Right. Like, and just the bar keeps increasing every time you discover new artists or new people come into the scene. And, like, I feel like sometimes it worries me a little bit because I'm like, well, I had to sacrifice a lot of things to get where I am. Like, you know, I mean, in high school, I was not, like, partying a lot. I was, like, very focused on my work, like, a little bit crazy, you know? And I'm thinking, like, how much sacrifice is it gonna take to get to that bar, like, relatively quickly in the future, right? And what does that do to people in terms of, like, unhealthy, right? Because getting to that bar might be unhealthy if the bar is, like, 10 times higher, right?
Yeah.
Right now I feel below the bar. You know what I mean?
Really?
Yeah, I feel just in the middle zone because, like, things are increasing, like, extremely fast, and people are getting really, really good.
I think that's why working at a studio is, they're at another level to everyone else because they're around other artists which they can see are clearly better.
Yeah.
Whereas, like, example in the Blender community, a lot of people hang out with Blender people, and a lot of those people are beginners.
Yeah.
And so they feel as though they're quite good.
Yeah.
When actually the industry is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's a little bit the same. I would actually compare it to 3D, right? Advanced in CGI, which is like, well, the characters are getting more realistic, everything. But the main difference between this and the increasing of the quality bar in concept art is that in concept art the tools don't get much better, right? In 3D, like, everything gets automated, like, you know, like, camera tracking is not manual really anymore, you know what I mean?
Right.
It's like there was a lot of very manual thing, like, I mean, like, I don't know the exact history of camera tracking, but I'm pretty sure that at one point you had to track each point manually, and make sure the tracker was following through for each point, and like 600 of them to get a tracking solution. And now all of this is like, just click automate track, you know what I mean? And just like do some quality control at the end, you know what I mean, to make sure the track is okay.
Yeah.
For your construction of your scene. And yeah, like, those tools are getting better, but for art, it's like, you could still do the same in gouache, you know what I mean?
Gouache?
It's in gouache, like, which is a painting medium, or oil painting, you know what I mean?
Right.
Like, the Photoshop is not significant, it's not order of magnitude better than oil painting. You know what I mean? In terms of, like, how fast you can get to a painting result. It's all in your head, right? And that's the very difficult thing, which is, like, in 3D, like, you externalize a lot of the things, and as the demand get higher, the tools get better. In concept art, it's like, it's still all in your brain, and, like, you can use 3D tools, but it's not going to help the thinking. It's going to help the picture, right? It's going to help more realistic, better lighting, everything, but it's not going to help your ideas.
I was going to ask about this, actually. Where do you think... Because, yeah, like, as you mentioned, there's a lot of jobs which are being made redundant for 3D art.
Yeah.
And that's something that a lot of the world is worried about.
Yeah. Well, the automation, right?
Exactly, automation. Do you foresee in the next 5 to 10 years anything in concept art?
I like that question. That's the question I was waiting for. Yes, very much so. And it's also like a part of like the worries about the bars and the quality is like, I think that what's gonna happen very likely is that we're gonna have some sort of machine learning application as part of the workflow. It's gonna start in 3D, and then the concept art are gonna adapt it from the 3D realm. Where, for example, like machine learning is starting to be applied, for example, in rendering, where like you give it instead of rendering with 1,000 samples, say like in Blender, right, which like gets refined with less and less noise every time. You could give the application like 1,000 sample and a 10 sample and compare the difference between the two and learn the difference. So therefore, next time you give it a 10 sample and it gives you, it outputs you a 1,000 sample render, right? And NVIDIA, they just did it.
Really?
Yeah, they just did it with iRay, like a couple months ago.
Whoa.
They completely did it. It's just real time, like 100 sample, no noise. I'm like, whatever, you know. Like, just game over, you know what I mean? For
That's
rendering.
crazy.
Yeah. And this is the next really big thing.
I had no idea that's what that was.
Yeah,
okay.
That's what's going on right now. That's going to be the next big thing.
Whoa.
And
what about digital art? Painting.
Painting is more difficult, of course, to machine learn. You know what I mean? Because this is not less mathematical. But I foresee you could have the sense, and a lot of people are like, well, machines are never going to replace creativity. And I'm like, no, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm just saying is that it's going to be part of your toolkit. That like there's going to be a machine that you direct to do things for you. So, for example, I imagine a case where you would design a character, you would paint it, and do all the things that you usually do. Except,
Perdón, acabo de
what you would do is
ver el comentario, no sé cuánto tiene. ¿Con qué fin estoy haciendo el modelado? El modelo es para videojuegos, es para tiempo real. Y por eso es el presupuesto poligonal de 20.000 triángulos. El chiste es que todo sea para videojuegos.
This character looking more aggressive, you know what I mean? Make that character look more smart. Give me a scale of different options, you know what I mean? And then it starts generating 1,000 option, then it reduces to 100, and then based on your preference, it would even learn your art direction, taste. It would learn your own taste and propose you 10 different options. And then you would just show that to the client instead of painting those 10 options. And I hate painting options, you know what I mean? If I could have like variation, like color variation, all of that could be handled automatically, like semi-automatically, you know what I mean, in a directed way.
Have you heard of automatics? Automatics?
Automatics, yeah. This would be based on some of the same principles, yeah.
Yeah, they had this similar idea. It was like
Me estoy basando en el presupuesto poligonal de Bungie con Destiny.
And so you get the face of the actor and the face of a vampire, you put them together, and then it fuses it, and then not only that, it does infinite
y pues ve que aquí puedo orbitar alrededor del objeto.
Like one with big ears, one with bigger fangs,
pues todo corre
and you just click,
en tiempo real sin
click
bronca.
until you find
exactly
the direction.
And it learns.
That's a concept artist's job.
Yeah.
That's something that could be out.
And I can give like a lot of other examples. For example, there's a lot of concept artists who they take a photo and they try to do a study with like, and they usually focus on kind of like the values or the colors or the brushwork, right? Try to have really like an elaborate brushwork. Well, then you could apply that in a way that like, if you have enough studies, if everybody collaborates and put all the studies in a folder and the original photo, you can tell the machine, well, learn what's the difference between photo and a really good artist study of that photo. Not a bad one, not a copy. I'm talking about like a really good understanding and stylization of that thing. Then you could learn to take any photo and make it into a really good stylized painting.
Yeah.
But what could be even better and even crazier is that if you're painting a character, for example, like for movies, like very often it's like they want like something very realistic. But like
Pero ahorita terminar ya el modelado y ponerme a texturizar.
And so what you could do is you give it a rough sketch, and based on its understanding of the relationship between painting and between sketch and photo, you could reverse it and be like, take my sketch and make it look like a photo, right?
Yeah.
And I see like a lot of potential of that, and a lot of potential for misuse too, sadly, which is like as like there's like something called like photo bashing in concept art, which is like kind of like to gain time, you take direct inspiration from a photo, you copy some shapes, some like like maybe an entire tree, you know, just to avoid painting it, you know, and it's gonna be faster, and it gives you like, and also like if the movie is realistic, then you can literally put that location. Sometimes the director will give you the location, a photo plate, and you're gonna paint your effects or whatever you are directing over that, it just saves time, and there's almost no point sometimes in painting the thing, right? But that also means that like sometimes like instead of people really thinking about the design, there's like instead of that giving more time for creativity and thinking, it actually gives just more, you know what I mean? Like there are way more paintings faster, you know what I mean? Like more realistic, but not necessarily better thinking.
Yes.
So instead of taking that time that you just saved on that technical task of painting that tree, and saving that time and using it for more thinking and more like storytelling and things like this, you've just saved that time and used it to produce 2 artworks instead of 1. Right? So instead of 1 better artwork, you just produce 2. And I see machine learning being misused in that same way, which is like just produce a shit ton of artwork, you know?
Right.
Just make more.
Yeah.
Like 200, 1 million artwork.
You know? Yeah. Right.
I heard rumors of like some like movie directors being like, oh, that's so cool, concept art, give me more, do 20 more robots, you know, give me 20 more robots, come on, give me more robots. We're just like, what's the point, like, what's your story, you know what I mean?
Right.
Like
just wants ideas.
Yeah, and like, I could see machine learning being completely misused as, oh, I want to see 1,000 robots, give me 1,000 robots, come on, you know?
Yeah.
Just automatically, like, semi-automatically, like, generated robots.
I can understand that, though. Like, I was working with Colin Levy on this sci-fi short, which is about drones in the future, shipment drones, and so we were trying to establish what is the look of a shipment drone. And it was literally like gather as much inspiration, present all the ideas, because we don't know which direction it's going to go. It could look like an insect, it could look like a perfect machine. There's so many ways, and I think, I can understand why a director would go, give me 20 more.
But give me mathematically precise 20% more insectoid.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And it's going to give it to you.
There's a slider with
there's a slider with insectoid. And you could create your own sliders based on, like, what you like doing with your art, you know what I mean? And, like, you could just design the first version and, like, how...
Are you worried about any of this?
Yeah, but at the same time, that's kind of why I'm learning science.
Yeah. You want to be ahead of it.
Hopefully, yeah. But I mean, and there's always going to be people who will be like, well, I don't want any of it. And they're going to do fine because they have been doing fine for a while now. Which is like...
You think they'll be fine?
I think so, if they're really good. But then, like, the bar for that level of craft is going to be even higher, right? Because then, like, if you do like one, if it takes you 1 week to do an illustration, right? And it takes somebody else 1 hour, like, you have to be... like, right? You can do the math in between too, but orders of magnitude better in order to justify that amount of time or day rate. You know what I mean? That you would pay the artist for that amount of time. And so I'm kind of like not worried about it taking my job, but I'm kind of like worried about it becoming kind of like impossible to distance yourself from if you just want to paint the traditional way. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Which is like I think nowadays it would be kind of hard to like draw entirely traditional art all the time. You know what I mean? For example, at the studio, I do about like 30% of actually drawing on paper and like or like with markers and stuff like this, and it would be impossible to go 100%. It would make no sense to go 100% for me. But I'm worried about kind of like machine learning becoming our Photoshop, and then, you know what I mean, and not being able to use anything else because like that's the
right.
That became the standard, and there's almost no other way. There's no way to escape it type of thing. But I kind of like, for me it's like it's like it's exciting. I kind of like embrace it, but
you can't really like put up a fight.
Yeah, exactly. It's the like putting up a fight against machine learning would be like a farmer refusing the tractor. You know what I mean? It's just it's kind of physics. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like there is no.
Like a Luddite, isn't that from France? The term Luddite, was the people that would go around with metal poles and smash up machinery on farms.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I know the word. I did not know the exact meaning of it.
Yeah. I heard that came from France. Could be
okay, yeah, could be, yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah. So, I think, like the good thing. Okay, so the good thing is there is no economic incentive to do that to concept art, right? Because it's not like we're a significant portion of the budget of whatever movie or game. It's like we're like compared to like engineering and programming and like and making all the assets, we're kind of peanuts, you know. And so there is a lot of incentive to apply those machine learning ideas to engineering and making assets and like quality control and a lot of other areas which are a lot more mathematical by nature and much more expensive. So therefore, there's kind of like a priority list of which one are going to be improved first. You know what I mean? And concept art is way down the bottom. Because it's the hardest to automate and the least profitable to automate. So it's like, whatever, it's going to be last. That said, it's probably going to happen at some point. Even if it's just the case of like, well, I kind of want to improve my process and like automate something that I find boring, so I'm gonna write my own machine learning algorithm and try to do that. You know what I mean? If that's possible.
Yeah.
Like, if there is a way I can do it, I might do it for fun. And then like, well, what if I release that software open source?
I think there's a potential for, more I think about it, for there to be like a lot less jobs.
Yeah.
Like, if you could take all the artworks of history, Rembrandt, Picasso, whatever, all the different styles, feed them into a machine. You've essentially stolen their their essence, and then it's like, make me a skyscraper in the style of Ephraim Mercier, and it's like
that wouldn't look very good compared to the Rembrandt.
But you know what I mean? Like there's if that happens, there's a very high potential for there not to be any jobs.
Well, it's not any jobs, of course, but it's gonna be like kind of like what happened to the farmers again. Going back to the farmer things, which is like in the kind of like industrial agricultural revolution, we went from like 90% of the world population being busy making food to only 10% of the population making food to like, I don't know, something like 2%, 1% right now, which is like farmers are one of the smallest percentage, smallest percent job out there, even though they create the food for everyone. And that's because like machine took over the manual labor. And so then we had a need for kind of like office jobs, right? So that created a need for education to people go do those office jobs. And if we automate those office jobs, I don't know what's the next thing. You know what I mean? When we get to the point where we automate those office jobs, like thinking jobs, like, you know, like more like scientific research, engineering, and philosophy, I guess. You know what I mean? It's hard to imagine what kind of society would look like when all those jobs are automated. But I find it slightly inevitable. Because that's like how things usually work, which is like, if there are things that are boring or expensive or like, you know what I mean, or like a lot of labor intensive, if there are things that are labor intensive, it gets automated after a while.
Yeah.
No, like kind of like no matter where, right? So UVs getting more and more automated. UVs.
Like UV unwrapping?
Unwrapping.
Yeah.
Retopo, right?
Have you seen Wrap 3?
No, not
software?
Yet. Not yet.
You take like a scanned mesh.
Yeah.
It's all noisy.
And you give it a retopo.
Yeah,
and
base
it
mesh.
wraps. Yeah, I heard about it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty insane.
Yeah. And you can make a list for yourself for even no matter what job you have. You make a list. What is the most labor intensive thing that my employee pays for, even though it's not adding a lot of value, right? Go down that list. You know exactly what's going to be automated the first thing, which is why doctors, primary care physician doctors, I feel would actually be the most affected by automation, right? Because it's like, if most of the people come to see a doctor and be like, oh, I have the flu, it's standard thing, you just sign the paperwork and give you the medicine for the flu, you know what I mean? If that's really that simple, like if 90% of the cases are non-specific, do not really need the expertise of a doctor, you could totally automate that. You know what I mean? So,
there's a competition now. Have you heard the X Prize?
Yeah.
Of
course, because it's a very labor-intensive thing of a very high-trained person, which has a very high wage, therefore driving the cost of healthcare up. Yeah. Right, and I think about like a lot of the tasks in concept art or 3D industry are gonna be in the same basis of like going down that list bit by bit.
Yeah. I heard there's the open competition. I think the prize is like $10 million, might be even more, if you can create a machine which can diagnose a patient as well as a board of 6 actual doctors, and then that can be used in the developing world.
But that's like
to cure the world. Almost.
Yeah, exactly. And that's like and of course, as in concept art, it's gonna be like, oh, there's not gonna be any doctors. No, of course there's gonna be doctors. It's just like, for example, right now we need more doctors, but
there's not
so we're just gonna have the app handle the outflow, or we're gonna have doctors be more focused on the patient, which the case do not match any record. You know what I mean? So the app is gonna be like, well, this is one of those 1% case, like, and then you actually have a board of 6 doctors trying to help you,
right?
And you would have more help for a specific problem, like orphan disease type things. Like you would have much more help for that. I assume, and so I think like the is gonna happen for healthcare for sure.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I think like applying that to like concept art. It's like the top studios would still need artists.
Yeah.
But it's like the budget filmmakers. Maybe AJ over here is gonna make his next film. It's like he could have just the software to auto-generate all the concept art, because that's the level that he needs. Whereas the top studios would still have no, like a low budget. Like most people don't get to hire a concept artist because it's expensive. But I imagine we'll soon have like iPhone apps where it's like, take a photo of me and make it look like Picasso, and it just looks perfect.
Oh, that already exists.
I think I've seen a little. Yeah.
I mean, it's not good, but it's
it's on the way.
It's already there.
Yeah, within a few years, I reckon.
Yeah.
This is fascinating. We could talk about this for hours.
Yep.
One final question. I think I asked you this in that email like a year ago about digital painting, but if somebody wanted to get a job as a concept artist.
Specifically as a concept artist, not as an illustrator.
Exactly. Okay. Specifically as a concept artist. And let's say they finished school, they got a basic art knowledge, and they've got a whole year, and they want to be able to spend that year developing their skills to become a concept artist, so that they can get a job at the end of it.
At the end of that 1 year?
At the end of that 1 year.
That would be a little bit short.
It would be short, but
a little bit short.
Let's apply compressed learning. What would their training regime look like?
Their training regime.
What would you map out?
What would be the level of that person art-wise beforehand?
Okay, that's a good point.
Right, because if they have to learn perspective and lighting and all those fundamentals.
Let's start with fundamentals.
Okay, the first couple months would be perspective and values.
Perspective and values.
Perspective, lighting, values. Probably.
Any books or courses?
Books, Framed Ink.
That's a good one.
Framed Perspective. Yeah. Both by Marcos Mathieu Mestre. And both are really good. He's like kind of this comic book artist who's also a storyboarder at DreamWorks, I think. And amazing guy, great teacher, amazing like draftman, like compositions. He has like a very bold style. And like his composition or storytelling wise are so simple. They work really well. So you can, I think, learn most of those things through that guy. That would be like the book, right? So you have to read it really fast because you have only 1 year, right? So
good luck.
Do that book and all the exercise, you know what I mean? There's also a website called Draw a Box.
Draw a Box.
Draw a Box, right? And that's like very basic draftsmanship training program for free. Entirely for free. And I did those exercises, and those are trudging, boring exercise. But they're very well structured, so let's do this. But one of the exercises was as boring as like you make 2 dots on a page and try to connect them in a straight line perfectly and stopping at beginning at the first one and stopping at the second one. I made about 50 pages of straight lines over and over and over again.
And that's training you to get like
perfect like a muscle control of like that line, right? And precision in terms of like you're not gonna overstep that line.
Yeah.
You're gonna end exactly. Like, it's kind of like projection, like mental projection of like I want that line to end here, and there's gonna be coordination between my mind and the arm, and it's gonna stop right there.
Yeah.
So that would be the first 2 months, which would be pretty intensive, about like 200 pages of exercises.
So perspective and values.
Perspective, lighting, and value.
And those 2 books, Framed Ink and Framed Perspective.
Yeah. Lighting would be the Sam Nielsen course on schoolism I recommended. And you can take like the one from Dice Tutsumi, which was he was kind of like lighting and color, kind of like art director at Pixar for a while.
Okay, I'll have to get it.
Yeah, and
what's his name?
Dice Tutsumi and Robert Kondo. Those are like 2 friends, and they made like a tutorial as well on schoolism. So this one, there's also Nathan Folk's one, which is like he's a DreamWorks kind of like lighting and color, like he does a lot of like mood boards and color scripts, right? Color scripting. Yeah. Very similar to the stuff you were talking about in your color video. So you could learn that from those guys, and then like months 3 and 4, which would be like design, like applied design, like principle of design. Problem is like there's not really a lot of good books on like learning how to design from scratch.
Design?
Like designing objects. You know, I mean, coming up with like shapes that make sense towards the function of the object.
Oh, right.
Or the thing that you're designing. And
right. So that the form follows the function?
Well, that's the very like engineering-based or design-based object design, industrial design type thinking. But there is also the how do you transition that industrial design knowledge and apply it to a more storytelling-driven medium, right? Okay. How do I shape my composition to best serve the story is form follow function, right? But there's not a lot of good books about it, you know.
Okay. How did you learn it?
I still don't know.
Okay.
You know, this is very simple. I know how to shape my lighting to serve the story. I know how to do a little bit of like storytelling and kind of like I kind of know how to make a picture, and you look at the picture and you get what's going on, and there's like I kind of like came up by myself with this idea of like hierarchy of visual read of like what do you see first, right. You know what I mean? And so prioritizing like, oh, it's a city, okay, it's a city that is raining and it looks like a city in the future. You know what I mean? And it gets more and more granular, right? It's a city raining in the future. And things are not going well. It's like Blade Runner, you know what I mean? Right. You know what I mean? Or like something like this, which is like, it's a hierarchy of reader. What is the most important? And then what I like doing is putting a twist on the third level, right? Which is like, oh, there's this kind of like archer. There's some creatures and an archer, right? That's like the first level of read. There's a bunch of monsters and a kind of like a hunter. Charging to and like second read, she's charging towards the monsters. It's like, why is she charging? You know what I mean? And then third level read, she only have 3 arrows and there's 3 monsters. Like she's like so badass. She doesn't even need like more arrows than this. You know what I mean? And then you get a kind of subconscious read. It's like she's not afraid, or and then you kind of start questioning. It's like, why she only has 3 arrows? Is that like the 3 left? You know what I mean? That killed her family, or you know what I mean? Like you know what I mean? And I kind of want to leave all the 4th level up to the people, you know what I mean? Because I'm not writing a novel here, you know what I mean? I'm just doing a picture. So if the people can come up with a satisfying 4th or 5th level of storytelling in there, I just leave it up to them.
God, I've never heard someone explain it like this. Where did you learn this?
I mean, I would love to say I came up with it by myself. I can't explain how did I came up with it. But I'm pretty sure I just ripped off somebody that I just don't remember. You know what I mean?
Yeah, right.
Which is like, nothing is really new, you know what I mean? Everything's a remix, so it's like, that idea is probably like, you know what I mean, like, somewhere in the screenplay classes that I had like a while ago, mixed with like another book on storytelling, mixed with a book on the composition, maybe like from Frame Link, you just rip that guy off,
right.
Yeah.
Great. Okay.
Can't explain where it's from. Won't claim it as original.
Great. Yeah, that would definitely fill up their year. And how would you recommend they get feedback?
Yeah, so they would probably need to create a portfolio, and the biggest recommendation is that like don't fall in the trap that I fell into, which is like, if their objective is a job, it really depends, right? Because I liked making pictures, and it's never been like I've never been a fan of like designing things on a flat plane, which is actually what most concept art usually should look like. Which is like, it's not an illustration. You're designing various options for solves of that one problem, and you don't need to paint the background. Just put it gray, you know what I mean? If you're designing a bunch of objects or character, don't paint the background, you know what I mean?
Oh, so you painted the background?
Yeah, but for me, I was more interested in like keyframe illustration style, and there's not a lot of jobs for that. There's a lot of jobs for designing props, the characters, the environments. There's not a lot of jobs for designing the props, the character, and the environment all together to pitch to the producer.
Oh.
You know what I mean?
Okay.
So there is everybody wants to get into keyframe illustration. There's not a lot of job in that. So the competition, the ceiling level is much higher. The ceiling level for designing objects and stuff is actually pretty low, I would say, in comparison, because every product needs designing the assets that are going to go in the product. Whether it's a film, a board game, doesn't matter, right? TV show, it's always going to have if it's if it doesn't take place in the real world, then somebody needs to draw it, and somebody needs to come up with all those individual elements. And so the biggest advice I would give is that if the goal is really getting the job, then don't do any keyframe painting. There's way enough people who are specialized in that. Do a lot of props, you know what I mean? Do a lot of environments.
So specialize.
No, not necessarily specialized, but do things that are actually concept art, primarily concept art. You know what I mean?
Like there's jobs available for it. Is that what you mean?
Yeah.
Okay.
There's way more people who wants to do keyframe than there are jobs to do keyframe, and there is actually, I would almost say, way more job to design props and characters and vehicles than there are people who are good at designing props, characters, and vehicles. So sometimes I almost feel that companies hire kind of like subpar designers because there's just not enough. Yeah, there's just not enough good designers. There is too much people, but there is not enough good people.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
So you would recommend find a field where there's a job available.
There's a need, yeah. And look at what's the professional stuff. And the thing is the reason why there's so much more concept art, keyframe concept art on the internet than there is kind of production concept art, right? Which is designing what does that gun look like for that main character? You know what I mean? Or what does the attachment holster look like? It's not sexy, the attachment holster. Everybody wants to design the gun, not the attachment holster. Yet there's a guy who has the job of designing the attachment holster, and he might actually be really good or not good at his job. But what I'm saying is that usually those people, first, they never have to worry about jobs because they do the actual work, and there will always be a need for that work with designing that. Being really good at designing the attachment holster, you will never have trouble finding a job because there will always be a need, and you're very it's very niche, you know what I mean, designing that thing, and so he will not struggle to find a job, and at the same time it's also not necessarily the most sexy stuff, you know what I mean? It's not the big creature, it's not the big vista shot, right? It's just a holster, and it has a beauty in it if you have the eye to recognize that beauty. But the thing is, those kind of things don't pop up online and become very, very popular. Yet to people who are in the field and love concept art, this has a lot of beauty to it. You know what I mean? Because you see the function, you see the thinking, and it's exciting. It's exciting to look at. And hopefully the audience, that doesn't take attention to itself, but yet they will feel it's natural and totally flows the story. But so that creates a kind of for example, on the ArtStation, there's a lot of keyframe concept art and not a lot of props, for example, because to most people, props are not as exciting as a badass character fighting with like 2 swords and jumping in midair and there's a dragon in the background, right? This is much more cool to the majority of people. Therefore, it pops up in the trending algorithms, and what happens is that beginners get a skewed perspective of like how much jobs there actually are for those keyframe jobs that everyone is fighting for and the bar is really high, versus like, hey, when designers out there, we don't like, and they keep seeing they keep trying to recruit concept artists and they see only like keyframe/illustration portfolios, and they're like do more design so it raises the bar for design, you know what I mean?
That's fascinating. Do you recommend people have that approach? Like,
well, it depends on what they like, right? Okay. But if they really want the job, then concept art is a way better strategy than keyframe/illustration.
Right, because they've got a passion for it.
What do you mean?
My question is, like, is it better to recommend people to pursue, like, the money? Or
always the passion.
Always the passion.
Always the passion. But you said in 1 year getting a job. That's right. Very tough. So the only way, the only realistic way in 1 year would be concept art.
Right.
Or matte painting, right? Yeah. Which is like a very specific, like there's a product need, and then you can, are you good enough? Yes, no. If you're good enough, you're in.
Right.
You know, it's that simple. There is no more complication. Keyframe, you have to be very good and way more than good enough. And you have to get noticed, which is like, it's really difficult. Like my first job was matte painting, was not keyframe concept art. You would never be keyframe concept art. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, full disclaimer is my own perspective on it. Maybe I don't know. Maybe there's more keyframe concept art that I've never heard of. Maybe they don't tell me. But yeah.
That's great. Awesome. Well, I reckon we have filled up our time, but it's been fantastic talking with you.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you. Take care.
Because some people will be like, my dream.
Since Blender 2.8, the sculpt mode in Blender has been improving so much. It's not even close to what it was in 2.7. There are new tools, there is new workflow, new performance, and in 2.91 there's no exception. There is special focus on working with multiple objects. There are ways to change between objects and to see them. So let's get into action here. So sculpt mode. Once you enter sculpt mode, you're going to notice that the other objects in the scene are slightly faded. So that is an overlay. It's an overlay setting that you can tweak together with the other overlays, and it's called Fade Interactive Geometry. It's a slider where you can make, you can dim the other objects more or less. By default is 0.5 and should be okay. But if you have, depending on the materials that you're working on, you want to make it more obvious, that change. Where you're working. If you want to switch to the other objects, you can press D, and that will D for not for draw, for switching. It's very quick and it works very well. So while you're sculpting, so it's very fast, and because each object has its own geometry, data, and stuff. It's going to allow you to work with more polygons. You can work with this one can have millions and this one other millions, and just like that, it's gonna be better. Blender is better at managing more polygons if they are in different objects. So if you have 50 million in one object, it's gonna be slower than if you had maybe 25 in each one of this. The other change is that now the XYZ symmetry is now per mesh, which is shared between all the painting and edit modes. So that also is another improvement to work with multiple objects, because each one is going to store its own symmetry. It's not in the brush anymore. So if you're working with an object that needs symmetry in the x-axis, for example, and another one in the y-axis, then this will be stored per mesh, each one with its own. And when you're changing between painting or sculpting or editing, that's going to be preserved. So another improvement for stability. And that's pretty much it. Actually, you can read a bunch of changes here in the wiki page. I'm gonna link in the description, because 2.91 in sculpting is really getting a lot of love. There are new tools and there is improvement in performance as well. But for example, here, this one, viewport, the HDRI location can be locked, so you can use Eevee as matte caps. Isn't that great? So let's see how it looks. In this file, for example, I can also show you, if you go into sculpt mode, you can turn on fade inactive geometry, and here you can see how when I press D, I can change between the different parts of the object, and I can just simply start sculpting those, and they only affect that one object. So super nice, isn't it? Also, what is nice, what I wanted to show you, and I got a little bit sidetracked, is that, I don't know if you noticed, but the reflections and the lighting in the character here is locked to the view. So when you move around, it affects the shading. So that is like having an Eevee matte cap kind of a thing. It's a setting that you can change to make it locked. So when you rotate around, the HDRI doesn't move around. It's just fixed, which it would be like it is in real life, right? The world doesn't move, doesn't rotate. We move with the world. But if you disable that option, you're gonna see that it follows the view and allows you to see the materials much better, because the whole lighting is changing and it just looks super awesome, especially for reflections. It's awesome. This file, by the way, is available. It's on blender.org. You can get it on the demo file section. It's by Emiliano Colantoni. And the improvements done in here in sculpting are done by Pablo Dobarro, the magician that is giving us so many features. You can go here in the wiki and see all the other features that I'm not showing in this video, but I actually talked about in the last live stream of Blender today. You can go to the 120, it was a few days ago, and around the minute 17:30, I start to... okay, so here is to share the whole list of changes, and then I even get to... then I get sidetracked, and then I get to share all of them. It's like a 10-minute part of the show just dedicated, actually more, 15 minutes, 30 minutes. Okay, this is Pablo Dobarro Today episode. It's very long, but I go into more detail because it's a live stream. All right, that's all for today. I hope you enjoyed it. Check out the new stuff, download Blender, share with your friends and family, and I will see you in the next video. Bye bye.
Desayunando. ¿Qué onda, Gabo? Saludos, saludos. Acabo de ver una entrevista con Finian McManus de Blender Guru. Bueno, Andrew Price le hace la entrevista a Blender Guru. Andrew Price de Blender Guru le hace la entrevista a Finian McManus, el que trabajó en Avatar y otras producciones como God of War y demás. Y platica que precisamente jugaba un buen de LOL, el artista. Que todavía lo hace, ¿no? Pero ahí se tiene que organizar. Pensé que era chiste de horario nocturno de arpita en LOL. Eso de desayunando. Sí, en Riot son famosos por el nivel, ¿no? He evadido sus garras, porque me conozco. Pero siempre que sacan algo promocional o algo del mundo, sí, sí volteo a ver porque trabajan muy chido. Igual los de Overwatch, por ejemplo, tampoco he jugado Overwatch, pero me gusta cómo lo trabajan, cómo trabajan la dirección visual, ¿no? En respuesta a lo de Activision, no sé qué hizo Activision. Supe del nuevo estudio. No sé si te refieres a que por las actitudes o decisiones prefirieron pintar su raya. Ah, canijo. Dejaron de sincronizarse los comentarios. Apenas que cambié de ventana vi que ahí había comentarios perdidos. Sueldo y prestaciones y muchos se quejaban en streams. Órale. Sí, de hecho también eso se celebra mucho en la comunidad de Destiny, ¿no? Que se separaron completamente de Activision. Por ahí creo que tienen unas broncas de inversionistas chinos, pero según yo eso es para otra franquicia. Eso se celebra mucho en la comunidad de Destiny. Lo abrí aquí para ver los comentarios en vivo. Porque por alguna razón no se veían. Ah, y de hecho estoy viendo que está escalado en OBS. No sé si sigue estando muy metálico. Vale, como está ahorita nada es metálico. Ok, tal vez es de secundaria. Ajá. Ok, tal vez aquí pueda ligar la curvatura. Sagrada. Le quiso hacer ojitos a Bungie de nuevo, pero ya no se le. Sí, eso ya tiene rato, ¿no? Según yo. Fue precisamente cuando ganó su independencia que querían que volviera a ser un estudio de Microsoft. Okay. Pero me encanta de terco estar usando la experimental. Bueno, por lo menos se salvó el de roughness. Ya nada más se va a pintar un poquito el color. Está raro. Procedural texture. Animated. Let's switch to object mode. Bueno, me voy a dar cuenta en la transmisión para reportarla. ¿Será el gradiente? Pues de acá. Color. Y ya me voy a esconder para dejar el video de social media. Albert. Vamos a ver chat.